Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to talk about mixed media, and I'm going to talk about some substitutions you can make if you ever find a tutorial that you really want to do, but you don't have the right materials, or maybe the materials used are not going to vibe with the way you like to create. So when you think about mixed media, you want to think about the order of operations. What goes first? What goes second? Here I'm starting with a collage. I am using some different papers that I've gel printed on. That's some deli paper, and I'm using some gloss medium for my glue. This worked fine, but that gloss medium was a little thick and it took a long time to dry. So a better option would have been my matte Mod Podge, honestly, because it's a thin glue meant for decoupaging. You could use any sort of PVA or white glue for this step, so you don't have to have exactly what the person you're watching a tutorial from in order to do the project yourself. So just kind of think about, is there something I can use that's similar that will give me the same results? If you don't have Mod Podge, you could use some Elmer's glue. Now you may be thinking, could I use a washable glue? Well, yeah, you could use a washable glue. It is a little bit different because it remains porous, but actually Mod Podge does too. Could you use a final acrylic varnish? Well, technically you could use it, but that's going to seal the surface and it's going to be more difficult to layer things on top and have things bond to it. So you want to keep in mind the properties of what you're using. But when in doubt, try it out. That's what I say, because I figure out you're either going to learn something, or or you're going to succeed, or it might not work, but at least you'll know that it doesn't work, and hopefully you'll be able to determine why it doesn't work. I like these thin papers best for collaging because they really grip down to the canvas surface and create a nice tight bond that's really smooth and easy to paint on. But you don't have to just use deli paper. You can use cardstock drawing paper. One of my favorite papers to print on is actually the Blick sulfite drawing paper. That's that little strip there that I just put on there that has the heart bubble wrap prints on it. That is such a wonderful printmaking paper. And while it's thicker than the deli paper, it's still really usable for this collage. So what I'm doing here is I'm just attempting to make a really interesting background, because I know the focal image that I want to paint is this photo of 3 cherries. And I saw that from the Conversations with Canvas challenge. There's these 2 challenges. One is called the Alphabet Dare and one is called the Still Life Paint Challenge, and they converge every week. And I thought that's going to be perfect, but I thought the 3 cherries on their own were kind of boring. So I thought, well, if I take the opposite color across from the color wheel, which would be from like a crimson red, would be kind of like a tealy blue-green color. If I make a collage with all these different interesting patterns and papers and textures, that would really make a very plain subject such as 3 cherries really pop and look interesting. So that's what I decided to do here, and that's why I'm choosing to collage this way. So think about the way that you keep your materials, because it's one thing to have all the materials in the world, but it's an entirely different thing to be able to put your hands on them and find them and use them. That's half the battle. Getting your supplies organized in a way that you'll remember to use them. So what I did a couple months ago, and I posted a video on this on my YouTube channel if you're curious, I took all my prints that I made, all my gelatin prints, and I sorted them by color. I bought some big plastic pouches from Amazon so I could keep all my papers together, all my greens together, all my blues together, all my browns together, all my reds together. And that has made such a huge difference in me actually using these prints, because before they were just in a pile and it was too daunting to think about sifting through all of that. But if I know that I'm painting something that's going to be orange, for instance, I could go to my blue packet of papers and I could collage with that for a background. Or I know that if I'm doing a still life and I just want some rustic textures, I can go to my folder that's got the creams and browns in there and find a bunch of things that will be interesting. Now you can further unify your papers with paint. So those 2 little jars of paint I have open, those are Wax Effects paints by Deco Art. And I was really curious about them because they're supposed to give you an encaustic look, but they're an acrylic paint. And so they had a big clearance sale on their big warehouse sale a couple months ago, and I ordered a bunch of different colors because they were 60% off. And the nice thing about this paint is that it's translucent and you can kind of brush it over, or I'm just sliding it over with these silicone brushes, and tint the entire background so that it's going to work better. And now I'm just going in with some a clear gesso. The clear gesso is going to give my surface a nice gritty tooth that I'll be able to paint on top of, and I won't have my paint slipping and sliding everywhere. Now, if you don't have the Wax Effects paints, that's not a problem. You could take that glue that you've been decoupaging with, add a little bit of acrylic paint to it to make it transparent, but tinted, and then you could go over that same exact way. So think about things you already have that could give you the same effect of something that you're watching on a tutorial or you're reading about in a book, because honestly, necessity is a mother of invention. Now, what I'm using here is a combination, mostly my homemade oil paint sticks. So a few months ago, I was going through my stash of supplies and I realized I had a lot of oil paint and a lot of it was quite old. Some of the tubes I couldn't even get open, and it was really a bummer because the paint was soft inside. I wanted to use it more, but I find that I love using oil paint sticks, but actually going into the oil paint, that can be kind of like I have to unscrew tubes. It can be like a whole ordeal, but the sticks are so easy. So I decided to see if I can make some oil paint sticks with my oil paint I already had, and it worked great. And here I'm using them. I used them when I first made them 6 months ago, and I wanted to see if they were still holding up well, and they were. They were just as good as my store-bought sticks I have by Sennelier and the old Winsor & Newton oil bars. So I was so thrilled to see that they worked just as well, and now I feel confident to make more oil paint sticks. So maybe you've got a product that's not quite working for you the way it is. Maybe it's tubes of oil paint, but if you had made it into a stick form, that would be much more useful for you. And you can try it. You can make a couple, see what you think. And that's what I did. And I really love using these, and they're so thick and juicy and wonderful, and I'm just so glad I made them. And I might have not made this oil painting had I not turned a bunch of my paint into sticks in the past. So I was really happy to see how well these held up, because I have really big tubes of Winton oil paints from like the late 90s that the caps I cannot get off. So I know I can just empty out that tube and I can make a bunch of sticks, and the sticks will keep just fine. So yeah, see, if your supplies aren't working for you the way they are now, think about how you could make them work for you, and just be brave. And if it's not going to work and you don't want to donate them, see if you can make them into something that will work, because high quality art supplies last a lot longer than lower quality ones, is something that I've found out over the years. And also the student ranges of brands from 20 years ago seem to be better than the student ranges from those same brands today. So you may have some gems in your stash and not even realize it. Now, oil paint sticks are essentially oil paint. You peel off the skin that forms on the top of the stick, and then you color with it, kind of like an oil pastel, but you can thin it down with medium. This is the number 3 lean medium from Chelsea Studios. Oh my gosh, if you're not sensitive to smells, these are fantastic, and they smell divine. They smell, my studio smells like a lavender grove right now. It is just, I love the smell of it. But you still need to work in a ventilated area. And this is where I want to get into the meat of this topic of how to transcribe a tutorial, because you may be like, Lindsay, that's great. I'd love to do oil paints, but it doesn't matter. I use the low odorless. I use the water mixable. I can't get over the smell. It just gives me a headache, and I just can't deal with it. I don't have ventilation. I've got kids. I've got pets. I just can't do it. What should I do? Okay, so here's where knowing how other mediums work come into play. Maybe you want to use oil pastels. Oil pastels will get you a very similar look to oil paint, and you can reduce your fumes quite a bit, especially if you use like the Caran d'Ache Neo Pastel. They have no odor that I can tell, and then you can also add some Sennelier on top, or even some budget brands like Pentel. It does have a bit of an odor, but it works great. Or maybe you're like, no, Lindsay, I can't deal with the oils. I can't have any of that around. But you know what else looks kind of like oil paints? Surprisingly, watercolor crayon. And I specifically am talking about the Caran d'Ache Neo Color 2s, or the eye crayon water-soluble wax pastels, or the Lyra water-soluble wax pastels. Those are thick and creamy. They blend with just a little smidgen of water to the same consistency of oil paints, and they are wonderful if you want to get an oil paint look at a smaller scale with no muss, no fuss. So you probably have something in your stash that you can transcribe. You could do this. Maybe you're like, oh yeah, but I want to work in a sketchbook. The watercolor crayons will be perfect for that. Or maybe even colored pencils. Colored pencils can give you a very similar look to your oil pastels or your watercolor crayons or your oil paints. Another thing that oil painting can be problematic by is just the glare that you get off of the screen, off of the canvas when you're painting. Now I have tipped this up and the lights are behind the canvas, so hopefully I can avoid most of the glare here in this tutorial. But even when you're painting it in real life, that glare can be, kind of a bummer. So maybe that's why you want to avoid using oil paints. Maybe you want to use acrylics. Okay, what can you do to acrylics to make them more like oil paints? There is like an acrylic called Open by Golden, which is slow drying. You could do this painting in the Golden Open acrylics, and it would work just the same as oil paints because it's really only about an hour and a half of painting on this. So you could definitely get it done in that amount of time before it started to get sticky. You could add slow dry medium to your acrylic paints and get a very similar look. So, be mindful of the things you have and how you can adapt them to fit what you want them to fit. For instance, the benefit to the Golden Open acrylics is if you wanted to glaze over top of them, you just need to wait a few hours for them to dry, and you can. With oil paints, this is done alla prima, meaning all at once. I didn't leave time for things to dry. But you can go over it much easier with acrylics. Another thing about mixing your medium, as long as you understand the order of operations, is you can use your mediums together. So for instance, say you wanted to have a lot of glazing layers, but you didn't have a lot of time. You could do your collage background just like we did. You could do your first layer with acrylic paints, let that dry, any old acrylic paints, and then start working over with the oil sticks or the oil paints. So learning how things work together is really important. Now you notice that I used a medium called a lean medium with this. That goes into the fat over lean rule, which is an oil painting rule, which basically means you thin down, use the thinnest layers first so they can dry, and then you layer up with your more oily or thicker layers that are going to take longer to off-gas and dry so that you don't have layers underneath off-gassing and cracking the surface above or even shifting and moving. So your acrylics are not going, once they've gone through their chemical change and they've dried, they're not going to change anything. Your collage papers that have been glued down, once they're dried, they're not going to change anything. So knowing that and knowing how to layer up your materials will make it so that you create archival work that's not going to peel, flake, crack, or turn yellow or do anything weird and unexpected over the years. And kind of knowing the properties of your materials can also help you transcribe your materials to other media. Sometimes I'll see something that, wow, that's such a cool idea, but they're doing it in, for instance, they're doing it in egg tempera. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do egg tempera, but I love the look of it. I could use colored pencils because the way egg tempera is applied is with usually small brushes and little hatching motions. Well, what's small and hatchy? Colored pencils. Learning how you can create the effects you want to create using modern materials that are easier to find and more convenient for you, more healthier for you, really can give you a lot more possibilities with your artwork. And, if you are looking for ways to explore different media, maybe you're not very comfortable or knowledgeable about different medias, I just want to put in a quick plug for my Critique Club membership group over in my Teachable School. It's $7.50 a month, and it has over 150 tutorials, real-time art tutorials, creative prompts, and it gives you kind of like a sampler of tons of different mediums to try so that you can, no matter what you're into, you can find a tutorial and find some guidance with those different products. So it's a great introductory too of different stuff that you might feel like trying. You can see the reference photo there on my phone. A lot of times that's what I'll do. I'll just screenshot a reference photo. I love the Instagram art challenges because it's fun to be painting along with other people, everybody using the same reference photo, and then seeing what other people make. For me, I find that very, very encouraging and motivating when I get into the kind of artistic doldrums. I think we all get that art block sometimes. We're like, I don't know what to paint, or nothing feels special, nothing feels fun. But seeing, sometimes just taking some of or putting up some constraints, I should say, taking some of the freedom, putting up a constraint can actually make you more creative and feel more free when you are making art. So having a reference photo that I have to find the inspiration from, I mean, it's not too hard with that. It's a really great photo. But having a constraint like that, I find allows me to be more creative. I am more creative within restraints for some reason. Maybe it's the designer in me where I did a lot of work for companies where I had to use specific products. So maybe that's why I find it easy to be creative within restraints. But I think it's I think it's a good thing. It's kind of like if you have all day and you have all the materials in the world to create, it can be really hard to make something. It can be really hard because you have decision fatigue. You have so many choices. Well, what if I start down the path and I realize it's the wrong one? Well, I don't want to do that. I got all day. I want to make sure I spend it wisely. And then you can end up at the end of the day with nothing because you took all your time trying to decide what you're going to paint with. It's kind of like nowadays where we have all these streaming services and we've got thousands of movies and shows to pick from that we spend all of our time that we have to watch a movie just scrolling through our options and not settling down and just picking something because we don't want to pick the wrong thing and waste our time watching something crappy. Instead, we waste our time trying to decide what we want to watch so we don't watch something crappy. It's silly. It's so silly, but I think it's such a human thing for us to fall into that kind of FOMO feeling of missing out or fear of making the wrong decision. So these Instagram art challenges help me decide, right? And then knowing other people are doing it too, it kind of has a built-in audience and a built-in community. And I find that also very motivating. I think that's why I like Inktober so much and World Watercolor Month so much, because even though they're like word prompts, still it gives you a bit of a boundary that you can be creative within. I think creativity with no limits is like a misnomer. Creativity without limits, it's like you can go in a bazillion different directions and get nothing done. But creativity with a boundary, with a limit, either you're going to use this product, you're going to use this reference, you're going to use this idea. I think it can help you find a starting point and give you a direction to go in. There's a book called Essentialism, and there's a graphic in that book where there's a circle, and it's showing you kind of like going in all these different directions at once, and these little arrows coming out from the circle showing you going in all these directions all at once, and each of the arrows is really short. And then there's another graphic which is the same circle, but you're taking all of your energy and you're going in one direction. You have this long arrow that's going out in one direction. So when you do focus and you work on something, you can get really far. But if you're stuck in that decision fatigue, trying to figure out what to do, you waste all your time just kind of mucking about and, thinking about what your options rather than just kind of striking forth and doing something. Now, I have added some oil paint to my palette there because I find when I'm using oil sticks and I'm painting alla prima, I do want to get some actual paint in on the end because you can like scribble the sticks down and add some media to it, but it's not as creamy as just grabbing some paint. So since I have the paint, I'm going to use it. But I usually just need a couple colors. I think I grabbed a white, a sap green, because my sap green stick, I don't think I had enough paint in it. It wasn't as, it would be fine for blocking in, but it wasn't very creamy. So I did need to use some paint there. And I added some some red, some like crimson color. And yeah, I'm really liking how this is coming out. I wish I put my, my polarizing filter on my camera. I didn't think of it. Because I was working at an angle and it would have worked in this situation, but oh well, next time I will. And I did take the photos with the filter and that worked quite well, but I love the texture of the cherries. I love the background. I'm really happy with how this came out. I hope I'm still happy with it in a couple of days. Sometimes you change your mind, but this was so much fun. This was fun. I'd been really struggling with a little bit of burnout this week. I think it's been very, very rainy and just kind of a bummer. So this really helped me kind of break out of it a bit. And it was fun. It was just a lot of fun to create. So I hope that you try something like this. I will link the reference photo down below so you can check out the challenge. They post something new every week and it's really inspiring. And give it a try and see what you come up with. Try it in what medium would you do this in? Let me know in the comments below. Tell me what medium you would paint this in. And yeah, you can even tell me what you would use, how you would go about it. There's lots of different ways to create art. If you're somebody who's primarily a watercolorist, instead of using the Liquitex clear gesso as your ground, you could use transparent watercolor ground and still start off with that collage on a canvas and then paint with watercolor or gouache if that's your medium. So there's so many different ways to kind of connect the dots and get you from, soup to nuts on your painting. And you usually can find a way to use your favorite medium and still work in a mixed media way that's going to give you that kind of look and effect that you want. The great thing about that is it means you can do more with the supplies you already have. And with the price of supplies these days that are probably only going to go up, up, it's important that we get the most bang from our buck and we don't waste our supplies and we put them to good use, right? Because we bought them to use them. We didn't buy them to display them on our shelf and think about how we would use them. We don't subscribe to a streaming service so that we can think about the product. We could think about all the shows that we want to watch for free without subscribing to anything. We subscribe because we do intend to watch things. We buy these materials because we do intend to create art with our hands with them. Otherwise, we would just use AI or we would just use like a computer program, right? I'm not comparing creating original work with a computer versus AI. I know those are completely different things. But I'm just saying, if you're buying physical media products, then, you're buying because you wanted to use them and not save them for best, because guess what? You do not learn how to be a good artist by keeping your supplies in the tube. The only way you're going to learn how to become a good artist is by using your supplies, and it's not wasting them, friends. No, using them is not wasting them. Even if you make something that is awful that you don't like, you still learn something, and it's better than leaving everything in the box and in the tube. Art supplies are quite slow wearing when you think about it, especially the more expensive, higher quality ones. So you can use them and use them and use them and still have a lot left over. You bought them to use them. You didn't buy them so that somebody will buy them for 5 cents in a yard sale after you're dead and they can use them. No, you bought them to use them yourself, right? So do it. Use them. Have fun. I hope this inspires you to get out the materials you have and see how you can adapt what you have to the tutorials you're watching online. It's not that hard, but it does take practice and it does take experimentation and it does take, yes, wasting some paper, wasting a canvas now and then, but that is not the end of the world. If you're worried about that, you can save cardboard. Honestly, I could have done this collage on a cardboard box, on a panel I saved from a cardboard box, and ended up with the same result. Would it be archival? No, that cardboard would eventually break down. But you know what? When I went to France in the Toulouse-Lautrec Museum in Albi, he did a lot of painting on cardboard, let me tell you. And if something is important enough, you can conserve it and you can keep it. So please do not let that be a barrier to you creating something today. So with that, go forth, grab those paintbrushes, grab that paint, make something awesome, and tell me about it in the comments below. I love how this turned out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, happy crafting.